July 2nd, 1937. I have felt a disturbance in the ectoplasmic fields, Your Excellency, Howard Lovecraft said frantically to Joe Steele. I have been watching the stars and the phases of the moon. The heavens are putting on a strange and weird display, unlike any I've seen before. The voices of the spirits of the other side whisper to me of things, dark things, bad things, things that have been, that are, and that will be. They speak of death and change, cataclysms, the suffering of billions. I sense that these are the last days of man. We are entering a new era, Mr. President, and I am afraid, so very afraid. Above all, I sense a threat to your life and mine. This is why I summoned you here. Joe Steele stood before the tall, scrawny Lovecraft in a simple navy blue uniform and jackboots, devoid of all medals or decoration, save for his pentagon star draped around his starched collar. They were in what was known as the observatory. The observatory was a massive structure, perhaps the most recognizable of any at the Tobias Institute. The top featured a retractable ceiling to allow the massive brass telescope to view the sky, and the walls were covered in strange Enochian script, star maps, and Latin phrases. A portrait of a silver-bearded man with only white orbs for eyes was painted onto the ceiling directly above the telescope, representing the grand architect of the universe, he who the fundamentalists called Jehovah. The reflection of the murals, paintings, and portrait could be easily discerned via their reflections on the heavily polished checkered marble floor. Anyone who stood in the massive dome building would be forgiven if they thought it seemed as if the universe itself centered on this one spot in the middle of the Pennsylvania countryside. It was truly breathtaking, and even Joe Steele was taken aback every time he visited the place. "What do these voices tell you, Reverend Colonel?" he asked. The newly christened Reverend Colonel of the American Fundamentalist Christian Church looked away from Steele and up to the portrait of Jehovah, muttering a prayer. The gangly Lovecraft resembled a mortician or perhaps a funeral director in his all-black suit. Even his shirt and tie were black. His long, pale face seemed to glow in the moonlight let in by the retractable ceiling. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. "I fear you may not wish to hear of what the spectral beings have told me. I fear you may not believe their prophecies in the dark. So I wish to contact them for you in person, so you will know what is to come, just as I do. It shall be our curse, but perhaps also a blessing, if we listen and take heed." Steele had always secretly doubted the faith, simply using fundamentalism as a tool to control the masses. But something had happened a few months before that shook him to his core, something that made even his utilitarian mindset crumble. "I had a nightmare, worse than any imaginable last Thanksgiving," Steele said, monotone but with just the ever-so-slight shaky hint of fear. "It was when Manifest Climax first began. I don't know if I put stock in my dreams or anyone's dreams, but let me tell you, Lovecraft, nothing has scared me like that nightmare. And then an apocalypse happened, things too horrible to describe. Do you think it was related to these visions? I was practically raised by the blind Christian gentleman, and I know the ways of Christian magic better than one would suspect of me, and I know sometimes the Grand Architect speaks to his followers in their sleep." Lovecraft readied an altar beside the telescope for a ritual. Soon he would begin his full-body tattooing process, in which the Council of Jehovah would permanently ink Enochian scripts into his skin. His rituals would be even more powerful then. He looked over at Steele as he placed some tea lights in a pattern and in a grim tone inquired, "What happened in this dream?" "The dead rose," Steele answered immediately. "The Council of Jehovah performed dark rites, unspeakable ceremonies, and broke the veil. Monstrous creatures crawled forth, from bugaboos and harpies flying down from above to a massive cyclopean leviathan covered in scales and writhing tentacles, rising from the darkest abysmal crevice of the ocean. Everything was destroyed. The New Jerusalem was over before it even began. I was killed in battle by these beasts. The world was laid to waste. I relive this terror every night as I try to pass into the realm of slumber, and I cannot for the life of me forget this one morbid nightmare. What do you think of it, Lovecraft?" With a slightly unsteady hand, the new Reverend Colonel lit the candles on the altar and took a small dagger out from under his jacket. It was the dagger of Solomon, a sacred relic that had once supposedly belonged to the prophet Burr. He ran the ancient bronze knife along his palm, cutting himself ever so slightly and letting his own blood dribble down onto the Enochian runes that covered the altar. "That dream would be most troubling to me as well, Mr. President. I can see why it has remained with you all these months. It could have been the stress of running a war, again, that triggered it. Or, again, it could be related to my visions, and to the signs I have spotted in the heavens. If you will give me one moment here, I will allow myself to become possessed by a spirit of heaven, and through me, he will tell you what you need to know." Steele nodded grimly. He hated to watch these Enochian summoning rituals, but this was possibly a turning point in history. He sighed, finally accepting the fact that he was becoming a believer, however reluctant. Should he not use every available tool at his disposal to fight the forces that would destroy both him and the nation? Just as in the days of Moses, Jesus, Burr, or Tobias, the veil could be lifted to directly commune with the other side. Or so they said. It was necessary. "Do what you need to, Lovecraft," said the president. After several minutes of chanting in strange, otherworldly tones, Lovecraft began to shake and convulse at the altar before collapsing onto the floor in a writhing heap, his limbs twisting.
"Behold the Spirit of the Lord!"
he howled as his mouth foamed. Steele stepped back and knelt in a mix of awe and horror, trying to both watch the unfolding possession and cover his eyes at the same time. He hadn't seen such a show since his old tutor Tobias was still alive. Truly, Lovecraft was a pure fluidation to even attempt such a monumental and Herculean task. Then, as soon as the fit started, Lovecraft felt silent, still, almost as if dead. "Lovecraft?" Steele asked with a quavering voice, as he shakily lowered his hands to his side. "Are you all right, Lovecraft? Are you still there?"
"Lovecraft is not here, servant,"
roared a metallic, almost inhuman voice from inside of Lovecraft's mouth.
"I have displaced his soul into the other side. Bow before me, Michael Guster Steele."
Steele prostrated himself on the ground, tears running from his eyes. Who are you, Great One?" Steele could barely get the words out.
"Jarl, he who is called the Angel of Destiny, the right-handed sword of Zion, father of prophets. I come to you now to share with you that which you should know. The day of reckoning approaches like a thief in the night."
"Oh, great angels!" cried Steele, prostrating himself again. "What am I to do? What would you have me do?" Lovecraft's possessed body twitched and almost seemed to levitate, although Steele didn't look long enough to see if this was actually the case.
"Like David and Absalom, you shall be betrayed by your son. This Judas Iscariot shall bring ruination to you and end your rule."
Steele couldn't believe it. Marcus Aurelius Steele was a simpleton, a dolt even, and Joe Steele was a lot of things, but he loved his own family. My son? My son is going to betray me?"
"Yes, Joseph. Your blood shall be on his hands. The blood of millions shall be on his hands. A beast of America he shall become, and he shall usher in the days of chaos."
Should I kill him? Can I stop him, Angel? Can I stop this madness? Can I right the ship of state and prevent these things, or are they written in the stars? For the first time in his life, Joseph Steele found himself crying his eyes out on the floor in a heap, as if totally defeated.
"I tell you these things because you are the champion of my chosen people, the father of the New Jerusalem. Serve the Lord, and you may yet survive. And in the south, a mighty man rises, and he shall spread my word. Watch for him. Now I shall leave, but I shall be with you, always."
At that, Lovecraft's body slumped to the floor, and the Reverend Colonel's correct personality returned. Shakily picking himself up, he asked Steele, "Did you learn what you needed to, Mr. President?" Steele sat rocking back and forth, his arms wrapped around his legs and his chin on his knees. "My son is going to betray me and destroy the New Jerusalem," he replied, tears streaming down his face. "I have to kill my boy! I have to kill my son. have to kill this Absalom in my midst. Lovecraft's eyes widened in horror. Are you sure, sir? Is there any other interpretation of this? Steele shook his head briskly, almost at the point of hyperventilation. The angel of destiny told me my son is going to kill me. He told me to act quickly. I need to leave and get back to Philadelphia. I need to get home, and I need to kill my own boy before he destroys me and this entire country. This is what the angel told me. And I will do as the angel of destiny commands, Lovecraft. He also told me of a mighty man in the south. He said he is rising and shall spread his word. What do you make of that? Lovecraft wiped the cold sweat from his brow and plopped onto a nearby chair. He adjusted his tortoise-frame glasses and said, I have seen this too. All the voices tell me of he who is to come. They've told me of him since 1918, during my days of insanity. I foresaw great destruction and coming war, and I saw a mighty man of God in the midst of it all, speaking in tongues and full of the Holy Spirit, a serpent in one hand and a rod of judgment in the other. I have wondered if this could be the second prophet. Steele almost gasped. The second prophet? There is only one prophet of Jehovah, and that's Aaron Burr. Any schoolchild knows this. Lovecraft's head whipped back and forth in nervous disagreement. No, sir. The Council of Jehovah first predicted the rise of a second prophet in 1838. Grand Wizard Brother Crow foresaw it while imbibing of the fruits of the Spirit. He foresaw a world in flames and a final rebirth of fundamentalism in the last days. I think, taking into account my visions, we are on the verge of this epoch, this Armageddon. Pray, Joseph Steele, pray to Jehovah for guidance, and I shall pray for you. Do what must be done with your son. So let it be written. So let it be done. All hail. I want to thank the countless readers and commenters that have fueled my imagination throughout the creation of this work. I especially wish to thank Doc Brown, Zoidberg 12, Murica 1776, Sergeant Hawk, Atomic Punk 0, Traveler 76, Hex, Imperialo, and many more for their ideas, input, illustrations, maps, and advice. As always, you can read What Madness Is This on alternatehistory.com. This has been a Napoleon 53 audio production.